She's like, I did not expect to be embarrassed at this reading. Okay, so I'm going to start with the beginning, which is called The Girl in the Story. Oh, I'm dropping bookmarks. That's okay. And so this has the image of my Ramona and Beezus diary from when I was 7, where it says, if I could write a book when I grow up, this is what it would be about. And I have written in my messy cursive, me and my life. I've always wanted to tell stories, for as long as I can remember. Made up ones were fun. I was pretty good at that, creating elaborate histories for my dolls, coming up with new episodes of the Smurfs or Voltron for my brother and me to act out. But I wanted to tell real stories, stories about my life. The first books I remember being obsessed with was Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House series. When I was 5, 6, and even 7, I'd tie my doll's bonnet around my neck, put on my winter boots, which were like those thick moon boots from the 80s, so it was really in character, and a long floral patterned hand-me-down dress that looked like something Mom might make with a new bolt of fabric from the general store and a bit of lace that she traded hand-churned butter to get. I'd run around like this and make everyone call me Laura. I wanted to be Laura so badly, it's embarrassing now. Those books are problematic. They're racist. My parents read them to me, but I remember them stopping and pointing this out. My mom, the main bedtime reader, would pause and stumble a bit during certain passages when Laura's family encountered Native Americans or Black folks. She'd clear her throat and say, "The way they are talking about people who don't look like them is wrong." I don't remember if I asked questions, but I saw the words she wouldn't say when I read the books to myself. My dad, whose hair was not quite as long as it had been when I was born or earlier when he protested the Vietnam War, read on the nights when Mom worked. He'd close the book after he finished and fix me with a serious gaze to say, that land that Laura's family is building their house on, it didn't really belong to them. It was taken away from the Native Americans. That's not fair, is it? I shook my head, but I still loved Laura, and they let me. The fact that these books, my first literary obsession, led to a dawning awareness of societal injustice and a very clear sense of where my family stood on it is something I reflect on a lot now. But at the time, what gripped me about the Little House stories was that they were about a real girl from a long time ago. A girl with tangled, mousy brown hair like me, who lived through a lot and went on to tell all about it. A girl who'd authored her own story. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I give a little bit more context on the pop culture I loved, on Ramona, and then shout out to Degrassi Junior High, if anyone watched that, with Spike, and Winona Ryder and Heathers, Sylvia Plath, Courtney Love, all influences. By the end of my adolescence, which for me was more like 24 than 18, I knew I'd collected a few tales that might be worth sharing, but I wasn't sure I wanted to. Not without hiding them in the metaphor in poems, or spitting them through venom in zines, or assigning reimagined versions of them to fictionalized characters. My panthers were three-headed girl beasts. Those brooding boys who looked like the rock stars I worshipped had done things that shattered me. The kind of trouble I got into didn't just lead to me being called a pest or a nuisance like Ramona, but to principals and therapists and EMTs being called. Instead of blinding scarlet fever, there was blind drunkenness, blind rage, blistering pain as I puked off fire escapes, lashed out at other girls, carved my ex-boyfriend's initial into my thigh, then tried my damnedest to black it all out. These were not the kind of stories that 8-year-old me ever thought I would have. They were not the kind of teenage adventures I daydreamed about after watching Degrassi or 90210. They did not wrap up neatly at the end of an episode, or even a season. They did not build into the triumphant backstory of a heroine. They weren't even the tales of a quirky but lovable kid who became a rebellious but whip-smart adolescent. They did not make me feel wise or good or strong. Above all, I knew it would hurt like hell to retell them. It would be like picking up the shards of glass of one of the mirrors I accidentally on purpose smashed and reassembling it. What would I look like in there? Through all the cracks, the blood stains? But I have to do it. For Laura, for Ramona, for Spike, for Brenda, for Sylvia, for Courtney, for the Stephanie who wanted so badly to be all of them, and above all, wanted to be the girl in the story. All right, thank you. Are we cool if I read a little bit more so I can read this other section? Okay, all right. So this section is called My Girls, and what you need to know is that at this point, I had just gotten out of an abusive relationship, and there's a reference to a duck, and the first thing, like we're laughing like you do about trauma, right? You just like laugh about, like Susie and I have talked about this, we talked about it in the book, in fact, I think. You just like have to have this dark humor, but yeah, so my abusive boyfriend, like one of his first moves to control me was he had my best friend's stuffed duck, and he defaced it and made me give it to her. So that comes up in here. So just so you know. Yeah, we should have given our content warning.
I don't want to interrupt your reading. But, I mean, there's like you talk about abuse and addiction and there's other things. So if anybody's sensitive to it, feel free to get up and walk. Like it's no problem at all, you know. But it's also very real about what teen girls are up against and what people live with, and also about how art is very healing and how writing through it can actually help us live through it. So.
Yeah, and that's honestly the perfect segue for this, because it's about my zines. So here we go. My Girls. People are lonely because they build walls instead of bridges, read the caption on the bottom of the drawing I taped to the wall next to my bed. A simple pencil sketch of a girl standing in the middle of a bridge, smiling contentedly. Isabel, the petite, soft-spoken freshman from my gym class, had drawn it. She doodled everywhere. Women with their arms wrapped around themselves on the margins of the notes she wrote me, tiny flowers on the sides of her Converse sneakers. She was the only new friend I made during my relationship with Greg. She gave me the drawing a couple weeks before my breakup. During the sleepless nights that followed, as I tossed and turned in Greg's pajamas, the soft sounds of my father typing in his office down the hall, and Tori Amos on my stereo singing about winter and silence and crucifixion and little earthquakes, I often found myself staring at it and the light coming through the cracks in my blinds. I couldn't shake the feeling that Isabel was trying to send me a message, like she'd known how isolated I was even before Greg and I broke up. I'd never told her directly, but maybe it had been in my desperation to find a bandmate for Greg. Or maybe she'd just seen into my soul, recognized that I was broken, and drawn me a picture of how to fix myself. I reached out through the darkness and ran my fingers back and forth over the words at the bottom, soaking them in. Build bridges, not walls. If it's a message, answer it. The next day I called Isabel, and she invited me to hang out with her friends. Her best friend Elizabeth, who was about to be a senior, fast became the older sister I'd always wanted. Her hair nearly reached her waist, most of it dyed inky black, but her pale brown roots were always showing. She had a big smile that revealed a small gap between her two front teeth, features that made her look as kind as she was, and probably threw off anybody who wanted to put her into some sort of sullen, rebellious kid box based on her hair and her paint-spattered, mostly black wardrobe. Elizabeth read as voraciously as I did, or as I had before my all-consuming relationship with Greg. I'd been wilting without books, like a plant without water and sunlight. Elizabeth arrived just in the nick of time to nourish me, to talk about Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, and Maya Angelou, to introduce me to a character named Weetzie Bat that reminded me a little bit of Elizabeth herself, bright and sunny, a touch spacey at times, especially when she fell for a boy, but always full of love. We spent most of our afternoons at the park. Well, not the park, a different one. Mills Park was in a quieter, more residential part of town. Instead of a statue on a hilltop that attracted skaters like flies, there was a historic mansion at the center that people rented out for weddings on the weekend. During the week, women pushed babies in strollers, dogs chased frisbees, and we were the only teenagers. There were no burnt patches in the grass from too many cigarettes, no old sculptures to lazily scratch your initials into while passing a joint. It's not that I had a problem with those things. I still smoked both cigarettes and pot, but it was good to have a break from that. To be surrounded by books and journals and sketch pads and the occasional acoustic guitar, by girls who didn't just welcome me into their world, but helped coax out the words that had run dry after my journal was no longer safe and no had lost its meaning. I needed that break in order to find this girl, the one that I buried deep inside of me. So that's the picture of me. That's that girl. But there was another girl I needed too. A girl I couldn't be whole without. Even though we'd only been hanging out for a couple of months when Greg put an end to our friendship, it felt like he'd cleaved my soul in half. I'd never dared to cry about it, the way Greg did, the friends he'd sacrificed for me, but I'd never stopped aching for her. Fortunately, the feeling was mutual. I don't know who called who first after my breakup, but that didn't matter. You should come to Mills, I said, and she did. When she arrived, lit cigarette in hand, wallet chains jangling, black and blonde hair in her face, Isabel and Elizabeth ran over, squealing an old nickname they had for her, because of course they knew her. From junior high, from stage crew, everyone knew Acacia. I didn't run to her. We said all we needed to with our eyes and a quick nod as she sat down, taking her place beside me, where she belonged, where she would stay. There's a Bikini Kill song, the soft one at the end of Pussy Whipped, that speaks of wiping tears from each other's faces, of hiding nothing, holding tight, and never letting each other down. That, even more than Rebel Girl, was my song for Acacia. Maybe it was supposed to be a love song, like the romantic kind, but it spoke to me of something different and deeper and more pure, the kind of love that would fix what the other kind had broken. And Acacia didn't blame me for the breakage. There was no hidden anger, no sign that she would use what had happened against me later. That was the difference between her and the last two girls I'd called best friends. She was never a bully, never passive aggressive. When I finally worked up the courage to apologize for the duck, she said, "I knew that was all him. You were just doing what you had to do." We didn't talk about why I had to do what I had to do. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. At the end of the summer, I convinced my parents to let me stay home from the family vacation and let Casey, who basically lived with us anyway, move in for the week so we could take care of the dog and the cats. I swore we'd be responsible and well-behaved. And mostly we were, except for the concert in the living room, except for the weed I invited everyone over to smoke in my bedroom with the windows open and incense burning. One night after getting high, we made a giant milkshake out of a whole carton of ice cream, put it in the biggest bowl in my house, and crowded around it, armed with straws, slurping and giggling. But my favorite night was the one when just the girls were over. We got stoned, went outside, and turned on the sprinklers. Watering the garden was one of my responsibilities, but we decided to run through them, drenching our tank tops and cut-off jeans. As the sun set, we plopped down at the small glass patio table, smoked cigarettes and more weed, and let our clothes dry in the heat. The idea arose somehow to become blood sisters. I remember it as a collective thought, like most of the things we did together, but I know that Isabel was hesitant. Acacia was covered in cuts and scars, as covered in cuts and scars as I was, and Elizabeth had some too. Isabel said she understood why we did it, but she hated our need to hurt ourselves. Ultimately, we decided that this was different. It wasn't about pain or numbness or blood. It was an oath, a declaration of sister love forever and always. So we all made thin cuts on our forearms and pressed them together one by one until everyone had each of her sister's blood smeared across her skin and hopefully inside her too. Then we went up to my room to resume work on the project that had become the mainstay of our sleepovers, our zines. We'd seen them before, in book and record stores, sitting on window ledges, in coffee shops, Xerox, mostly black and white, but sometimes in color, sometimes all words, sometimes all images, mostly a mixture. The sizes, the design, the content varied. Music, politics, poetry, rants, weird random thoughts. We realized you could do anything with them. We realized that people our age were making them, that we could make them. So we covered my bedroom in paper, in poems, rants, sketches, cut up magazines, and turned it into an expression of our aching truest hearts. As we cut and pasted and wrote and drew together, I paused just to look at them, to take it all in. This bridge we were building out of words and pictures. And these girls. It was hard to believe that after so many years and so many attempts to fit in, that these smart, passionate, well-read, gorgeous creatures were my best friends, my girls. And then there's Susie's illustration, which I think you said is your favorite one that you did, right? Yeah. All right.